Hi, my name is Holly Ammerman, and I have to say that when I get assignments like this, I normally cringe. And the reason for that is that I am adopted. And so I never really know which direction to go with this, especially since in the last decade or so, I have met more and more members of my genetic family. Um, and then recently, this has become more difficult for me because in the last 3 years of my life, both of my parents, as well as all of my living grandparents, have passed away. And so it's been a really rough few years. But there's been some joy among that too, because as you'll find out, I've also got to meet some siblings. Um, so, first, a little bit about me. I identify as white, she, her, Ms., and I was born in Gainesville, Florida. But shortly after that, we moved to Orlando, and I was raised pretty much my entire life in Orlando, Florida, and moved to Rome, Georgia, about 10 years ago with my husband just to find a quieter place to raise kids, basically. But starting with my adoptive parents, who one of the questions you always get as an adopted kid is, do you know your real parents? Yes, I know my real parents. Their names are Dan and Bev Kennedy. They adopted me when I was a year and a half old, but I was placed with them when I was 6 months old. So I don't remember anyone else. I don't remember not knowing I was adopted. It was something we always talked about in our family. And one of the reasons for that is that my next brother, Skip, who's the guy in the middle in this picture here, he is also adopted, and I was about 3 years old when that happened. And so I have a very small memory of going to get him at the Children's Home Society. And then my youngest brother, Sean, is the miracle baby, which many adoptive families have one of these. My parents couldn't have kids, and then suddenly my mom got pregnant. She didn't even know she was pregnant until she was 6 months pregnant because she couldn't imagine that she could have a baby. My father, Dan Kennedy III, has two master's degrees in library science and English literature. He speak and wrote and read in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, and was very interested in classical languages. And because of that, when he served in Vietnam, he actually had a super cool job and taught English to the Vietnamese. He was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but from the age of about 10, he grew up in Charleston, South Carolina. His father was in the military, which we'll talk about in just a second. And he grew up, as far as racially, obviously identified very much as Irish. But he did have a mammy growing up. So an African American woman that looked after him and his younger brother, Steve, who is my uncle, and is 4 years older, 4 years younger than my dad. My dad was the first in his family to go to college, and he did so on a baseball scholarship. My mom, Beverly Holiday, that's where I got my name. Her maiden name was Holiday, and so that's why I'm Holly. Was born in Beckley, West Virginia, and she moved from there when the coal mine shut down to Orlando, Florida, long before Disney was there. She was a teacher and a media specialist and had a bachelor's degree. And like my dad, she was the first person in her family to go to college. She has one sister, my Aunt Debbie, and my Aunt Debbie is about 10 years younger than her. And so we'll talk a little bit about my mom's family. So my grandfather, Bernard Holiday, he was one of 11 kids, and they were also from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but they moved to West Virginia so his dad could get a job in the coal mines, and that was a very good thing for them. But they were very poor. They actually had an outhouse. They didn't have enough bedrooms, so in West Virginia in the winter, my grandfather slept on the porch, actually. He very much wanted to be a doctor and was actually accepted to medical school, but his family found financing for all of that except for $2 a month, and so he was never able to go. So he spent his life coal mining, and then when the coal mine shut down, he moved to Orlando and was a sign painter and a milkman. Very hardworking man. but unfortunately smoked his whole life and passed away from lung cancer when I was about 6 years old. My grandmother, Alma Dew, was born in Beckley, West Virginia. She was the only child, which is very unusual at that time. Very, very close to her mother. And when she moved to Orlando, she became a dental hygienist. One of my favorite things about her is that she got remarried at 86, and my son was actually the ring bearer in his great grandmother's wedding. So that was kind of cool. Of all the people in my family, I would say that she probably harbored the most racial fear. I don't think I would consider her racist, but I definitely think that she held some long-held racism. She certainly was a kind woman and would have never said anything to anyone, but she did use the term colored. And I remember hearing her say that and wondering about that. But that was part of her upbringing, I think. My dad's family, my father is Daniel J. Kennedy III, so going back 2 generations, we have 2 Daniel Joseph Kennedys. And I don't know a whole lot about my great-grandfather, but my grandfather died before I was born, Daniel Kennedy Jr. He was an Air Force mechanic. He was also born in Philly, and he worked all 30 years of his life in the Air Force. I don't know anything about his mother either, Beulah. Now, my grandmother, Margaret Kelly Kennedy, my dad's mom, who just passed away not that long ago, she was born in Ireland, in Northern Ireland. Of course, it was part of Ireland at the time. And she immigrated to the United States when she was 3 with her father, James, and her mother, Martha. And a few years ago, we took a trip to Northern Ireland, and this is a picture of my brother Sean and I actually at the World War I Memorial in Coleraine, Northern Ireland, where James's brother, Archibald, is memorialized for his service and unfortunately death in World War I. So my grandmother's uncle was killed in World War I. We got to see that. We also got to see the house where she was born when we were there. So that was pretty amazing. Okay, so that's the adoptive part of my family. This is a picture of my mother, Beverly Kennedy, to my right, and my birth mother, Catherine Hunter, to my left, on the time that they met, and the only time that they met while they were still alive. They loved meeting each other. They actually look a lot alike. Sometimes when I show this picture, it's hard for people to tell which one is. That's one of my favorite things to do. But Catherine found me about 10 years ago using a website that I had registered on when I was in my undergrad. I really had no interest in finding my birth family at that time, but she did come into my life, and we've accepted her. My children call her Grandma Catherine, and but her life is very different from that of my adoptive family. She was born into great wealth. Her father, Barton Tuck, is a golf course magnate. He helped to develop the Pinehurst course and that entire community. He was also a big part of the remaking of downtown Greenville, South Carolina, where they settled after their children grew up. Catherine was the oldest of 4 children, so I've met my aunts Emily and Linda and my uncle Noel through time. Her mother, Grace, divorced after she was an adult. But she and her sisters and her brother all went to boarding schools. And Catherine graduated from college at age 17 and was doing her master's degree at the University of Florida when she had a one-night stand with Scott Young. And I was the result of that. She hid her pregnancy from her parents. Her sisters and her brother and her dad were all told that I was a appendix being taken out. And so they did not know about me until Catherine found me. Catherine has no other children, so I am her only child. So that has been an interesting thing. And then just last year, I got a 23andMe kit to find out a little bit more about my genetic heritage, and ended up finding Megan and Brendan, who are my biological father, Scott's children. They are about 10 years younger than me, and they did not know I existed. Their mother knew that Scott had had a baby in college and had given him up, but she did not know anything about me. And so it was a little surprising, but the three of us have reconnected and we have really enjoyed getting to know each other. Megan and I talk about once a week because we both always wanted a sister, I think. Scott, I will probably never meet. Unfortunately, he is a person that has dealt with a lot of issues. He is also adopted, which is very interesting. He was adopted by a very wealthy cardiologist, Dr. Young, and his wife, a nurse, Mrs. Young, both of whom are deceased, so I have not been able to meet them, obviously. Was raised in a very wealthy environment, similar to Catherine. They met actually originally at boarding school, so very similar backgrounds, but he struggles with bipolar disorder and substance abuse and things like that. And so Megan and Brendan have no contact with them, and I, of course, would never ask for them to do that. So those are my peeps. It's confusing, and I apologize for going a little long, but that's my family.